Welcome back to the Dartmoor Diaries, where progress is steady, mysteries are plentiful, and the plumbing is finally beginning to look vaguely civilised. This week, we begin in what was once the Great Hopper Room, the former domain of the enormous green pellet hopper that loomed over us like some industrial creature from a bygone era. Now, however, the transformation is well underway. The timber walls have been lined, plastered, and painted with the sort of reverence usually reserved for museum exhibits. And now, at long last, the plumbers have arrived, appearing with pipes, valves, and a quiet confidence we admire immensely, to install the first pieces of our new heating system. But there's more. In a remarkable display of organisation, we have finally entered the world of modern technology. Yes, we now have security and animal detection cameras, and, rather unexpectedly, they have been busy. Very busy. Not only have they filmed the usual Dartmoor suspects, foxes, badgers, and the occasional wind-blown leaf with an inflated sense of purpose, they've also caught something rather more unusual. Let's just say, when a police officer appears at your back door performing movements that defy categorisation, holding what may or may not be a questionable piece of equipment, it does leave one with questions. Many questions, and naturally the camera's caught everything, but more on that later. As if that weren't enough, the local village seems to have slipped back in time to the 1950s strange happenings. Whispers, rumours, and before long, these curious events reached our house, leaving us somewhere between intrigued, mildly alarmed, and struggling not to laugh. So, settle in, because today's episode brings you revived timber walls, heroic plumbers, unexpected surveillance revelations, and a mystery that would make even Inspector Lestrade raise an eyebrow. Welcome to another week on the Dartmoor Diaries, where the house is improving, the plot is thickening, and the cameras are watching everything, perhaps a little too well. We decided a few weeks ago that it was high time we introduced a little modern wizardry into our lives, specifically security cameras. Not for anything dramatic, you understand, simply to discover which creatures wander through the garden at all hours, keep a watchful eye on the house, and serve, rather practically, as a doorbell, since every courier on Dartmoor seems to materialise at the back door without warning. After a little research, and a very well-timed email from Reolink asking whether we might be interested in trying their cameras, we quickly realised their system offered exactly what we were looking for, so we arranged to receive both an exterior camera and an interior one, eager to put them straight to work. We wanted something that didn't require a subscription, would function both online and offline, and ideally run from solar power, because as you may know, Dartmoor electricity occasionally enjoys a dramatic swoon. We also needed smart alerts for anyone appearing at the back door, plus 360-degree automatic tracking, and 4K night vision to capture the wildlife that pays us nocturnal visits, and within minutes of installing them, it became abundantly clear that these cameras were about to show us far more than we expected. To get us started with our new swanky cameras, we picked what we hoped was the perfect position. Once we'd finally agreed on the spot, Watson set to work creating an extra plinth for the solar panel to be attached to. Our soffits are deeper than most, a delightful Victorian quirk, and because this camera is going on the north side of the house, we wanted to make sure the panel had enough clearance from both the building and our original gutters to maximise its charging. So Watson headed straight to his workbench and built exactly what we needed. A neat little extension for the solar panel, and, in true Watson fashion, it was crafted beautifully, cut to size, sanded smooth, and painted black to match our exterior, so it all but disappears into its surroundings. The Atlas PT Ultra, our exterior camera, was incredibly easy to install and secure to the outside of the house. Within a matter of minutes, the camera was attached and in place, solar panel included. It was all remarkably straightforward, which is not something we often get to say up here on Dartmoor. Like any solar panel in this part of the world, we were a little nervous that it might not receive enough light to actually power itself. The weather has been determinedly ghastly almost every day since we installed it, so our expectations were modest. But so far we have been 100% successful, which honestly feels like a minor miracle. And then today, at long last, we saw the faintest glimmer of sunshine. According to the camera's battery reading, it is still sitting at full charge. That small victory alone has been rather exciting. Now, if anyone out there is looking for an exterior or interior security camera that you can operate directly from your mobile phone, one that sends instant alerts, offers remote access, and even has two-way audio, which has been great fun, especially when a cup of tea is needed, or when we're at the far end of the house and need to let a courier know we're on our way, and you'd like to give Reolink a try, head to the link in our bio. You'll find the Atlas PT Ultra exterior camera, the E1 Zoom interior camera, and their Black Friday deals. With that, we'd like to say a big thank you to Reolink for gifting us the Atlas PT Ultra exterior camera, featured in this video, along with the E1 Zoom, which captured the beautiful time-lapse at the end. There's more to come with this little device over the next few days and weeks as we have a bit more fun with it. The only thing left for us now is to pick up some cable clips and make everything super neat and tidy. Now, of course, being up here on the moor, we hear all sorts of things. Whispers on the wind, tales in the pub. But this time, we appear to have captured actual evidence. Not on paper, mind you, on camera. However, before we show you what we managed to record, we had a visit from a rather peculiar police officer. I do believe he introduced himself as Officer Lestrange, which, thinking about it, was rather fitting. He appeared at the back door performing a series of curious bobbing movements while swinging what could only be described as a length of plumbing insulation wrapped in black electrical tape, apparently masquerading as a police truncheon. I honestly had to hold back the laughter. This Lestrange couldn't possibly be for real. Or could he? He informed us of the situation at hand, that there had been a prison break, and that he and his team were positioning themselves at all the more remote houses in the area just in case one of the escapees sought refuge. They were, as he said, ready to pounce. For quite a few cold, misty hours, he paced about the garden, occasionally stopping right in front of the kitchen window to perform another inexplicable round of knee-bending. Then, all of a sudden, the Reolink motion alert triggered on my mobile phone, and there they were. 2 prisoners, one sprinting for dear life, and the other looking absolutely exhausted, tearing past the coach house and straight towards Officer Lestrange. Now this was incredibly peculiar. According to the newspapers, which aren't always the most reliable, Dartmoor prison is currently closed. So how on earth did our cameras capture what looked like 2 inmates running down our driveway, and then being chased in circles around the house by Inspector Lestrange? The family who lived here from the 1950s to the late 1960s told us that a convict once escaped, either from the prison or more likely from a working party, and sprinted straight across this very lawn before vanishing onto the moors. Records also show that Robert Smith and Alexander Blair escaped from Dartmoor in November 1963 and remained free for 5 days. Both later received an extra 18 months for housebreaking, as they called it then, burglary and related offences. Smith had been serving 8 years for armed robbery, Blair 6 for burglary and housebreaking. So could one of these 2 have been the very man who ran across our lawn? Or could it have been one of the other escapes? We'll probably never know, though perhaps the records will reveal something in time. We will be investigating this further and paying a visit to the Dartmoor Prison Museum very soon to see if we can dig up any additional information about the fugitive reportedly seen on our lawn in the late 1950s or early 1960s. We'll keep you updated on what we uncover. As we mentioned, it's been a rather chaotic 2 weeks trying to get everything finished in the boiler room, but I'm pleased to report that we are, at long last, officially winning. Watson managed to carve out enough time to get the OSB up on the walls, particularly on the soon-to-be boiler wall, giving us that extra strength needed to hold everything securely in place. He has spent hours in the coach house cutting various puzzle piece panels so the entire room could be lined and prepared, ready for us to sheet it with plasterboard. With a generous amount of glue applied, Watson soon had the whole situation firmly under control. this is the wall where our new boiler unit will sit, and as you can see, Watson has already run all of the electrics and cut his meticulous holes at precisely the right heights for everything that will be housed on this side of the room. Next, we set about sheeting the boiler room with plasterboard. Always a delight when you're working with high ceilings and awkward angles. It felt as though most of the key work over the past week had taken place either at night or in near total darkness. As we were still in the middle of sheeting everything up, we only had a few plug-in lights to guide us, so visibility was, let's call it atmospheric. It took us a few days between other tasks to get the room fully sheeted and to plaster and sand all the seams ready for painting. As soon as that was done, Watson Sr. came to stay for a few days to help Watson put up the tongue and groove panelling on the boiler room wall. Originally I had planned to torch this, which of course I experimented with and had an inordinate amount of fun doing. However, with this particular type of pine, I didn't quite achieve the effect I was after. So, after my little adventure with the blowtorch, also known as the weed torch, I finally set it down and resigned myself to the fact that this wall would, in the end, simply return to being painted. So I immediately got to work priming the pine with some Zinsser, making sure the knots wouldn't weep over time before I finally had a moment to get the first coat of paint onto it. In the meantime, Watson, and Watson Sr., who was once again an enormous help, set about cutting the holes in the ceiling for the pot lights, and finally, at long last, we had proper light and could actually see what we were doing, which is hugely advantageous when renovating and painting a room. At this point I should mention our first small disaster. After plasterboarding the ceiling, we endured an epic bout of wind and rain, and the next morning discovered a damp patch on the new boards. A tiny hole in the ridge-cap tile pointing had allowed water to blow straight through, creating a small but determined stream inside. It wasn't terrible, and arguably better to discover it now, but still frustrating after weeks of the roof being perfectly dry. As part of our madness to get this room ready for the plumbing team, we also set about tiling the floor before putting up the tongue and groove. For this space, we wanted large 600 by 900 dark anthracite slate look tiles, the same style we hope to eventually run through the outdoor courtyard. So the idea was to create a seamless flow from inside to outside, while also tying in with the slate already used elsewhere in the main house. We must admit, it was utterly back-breaking work, especially as we reached the final tiles. These were not light by any stretch, and after several hours of lifting each one, cutting where needed, and laying them into place, Watson was absolutely done in. But they look fantastic, and we can't wait to show you the final result once the plumbing team is finished, and we've managed to bring the room back to some semblance of order. Over the next few days I grouted the tiles with a black grout which looks fantastic. It's been an interesting balancing act, keeping the dehumidifier running to pull out any moisture, while also gently heating the room so that everything, from the plaster and paint through to the grout, cures properly. After the grout had a few days to fully cure, we covered the floor with dust sheets so we could get on with the next round of plastering and sanding, building up the layers ready for me to begin painting. Now, I must say, I once again found myself in that familiar and frustrating place where I simply couldn't cut in before painting. With a bit of a deadline hanging over us, and time very much against me, I needed to get the majority of the walls painted overnight. There was no chance to tape, paint white, cut in with the colour, and remove everything in time, especially with the temperature inside being nearly as cold as it was outside, or colder. Even if I had wanted to, my favourite blue cutting-in tape, the one I've relied on for years, decided it wanted nothing to do with the ceiling. Even after a bit of burnishing, it refused to stick. It just fell off as if it had never possessed adhesive at all. And of course, there was no time to head out to find an alternative. The room was simply too cold and nothing wanted to cooperate. So, once again, I had to paint first and come back later to cut in. Thankfully it all worked out and you'd never know from the final finish. But I must admit it was very frustrating indeed. One of those classic Dartmoor moments where the house seems quietly determined to test one's patience. Next on the list for us over the weekend was relocating our water filtration system from the old machine room next door into the new boiler room. With Watson Sr. still on hand to lend some much-needed strength, Watson and Watson Senior set about moving the pressure vessel and the tanks. Using our small sack barrow, Watson strapped the vessel on and wheeled it into the adjacent room. As you can imagine, it was not a light piece of kit. With a bit of jiggling, the pressure vessel was manoeuvred into its final position and set in place, ready for Watson to begin assembling the new pipework for the room. Watson had already prepped and drilled all the holes needed for the pipework from the other room, and soon had the new pipe pulled through and clipped neatly along the wall. He quickly added a bead of silicone to the skirting board and the tiles to create a water seal before we set about moving the filtration tanks into place, knowing full well that once they were in, accessing the back wall again would be nearly impossible. Watson Senior got to work rewiring the pressure vessel while Watson continued in the background, prepping his new pipe system. Meanwhile, I was making one last colour change to the skirting board. Watson was finally ready to bring in the 2 water filtration tanks, set them up with the new pipework, install the carbon filter, and mount the UV filter on the wall behind so everything was ready to go again. It didn't take too long, but it was a little fiddly in places as there's a good amount of pipework and cabling connecting everything together. As soon as everything was set, we switched on the pressure vessel, opened the water valves, and we were up and running again with no issues, which was a relief, as you never quite know what can go wrong with a system you've inherited. But all went smoothly, much to our delight. The tanks are being serviced next week, a new carbon filter has already been installed, and a brand new UV bulb is up and running. As mentioned earlier, the plumbers have been in this week and have started installing the new heating system which, fingers crossed, should be up and running by next week at the absolute latest, or, if we're very lucky, by the weekend. That would be ideal, as the temperature has dropped dramatically today, and it's been so chilly inside the main part of the house that even the paint seems to be considering hibernation. Watson even saw a small flurry of snow drift past the window this afternoon, which felt like the house giving us a polite reminder that winter waits for no one. So, fingers and toes crossed that we'll have warmth coming through the radiators by the end of the day on Friday, and if not, then Monday. preferably before I start wearing more than the already 5 layers of thermals and sweaters that have become my staple dress code these days. Then, just when we thought the week was over and the strange happenings had finally concluded, my phone pinged with an alert and the Reolink app burst into life, apparently determined to notify me that there was still a prisoner on the loose, enthusiastically running laps around our property. The prison lights were blazing away in the background, which raised the obvious question, was something truly amiss? Or had the prison simply forgotten how to turn the lights off now that the entire place is supposed to be empty? And as for our mysterious runner, was it Watson in his new running kit, valiantly attempting some evening cardio? Or was it, in fact, an escaped inmate enjoying a slightly more scenic route? At this point, we may never know, though the cameras certainly seem eager to keep the mystery alive. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please don't forget to like and subscribe below, and do send us a message in the comments. We love hearing from you. We look forward to seeing you again very soon.